Welcome everyone to This Week in Svelte. I'm Paolo. I will be your host for today, and joining me there is up to
It's
you,
me,
Enrico.
Enrico.
So we have a lot to talk about today. So let's quickly go over some very maybe uninteresting. I mean, it's always interesting. Let's go through some quick Svelte release. So Svelte 5 is obviously in continuous development. So there was a change for the inspect API. So if you know about the inspect rune that allows you to like console log something on the console very quickly. There was a minor API change. And there was, new events were added. Um, there is, I think, support for @const inside snippet blocks. So that's something always enjoyable. I don't know personally. I don't know about you, Enrico, but personally, I enjoy @const very much. I know it's a bit. I know it's a bit controversial. Like I know not everybody likes const.
I've said
Um,
it before on the show. I'm a const user. I like it a lot. I'm actually the kind of developer who, within a function scope, I will define redundant variables just to reuse them the next line over because it makes the next line a little smaller. I think JavaScript, when it compiles, it'll optimize that out and kind of inline the logic for you. So it's not really a performance hit as much as it is a nice readability improvement. So that's why I'm a big believer in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I like to have a clear indication of what a bunch of calculation is. Like @const, my number, it's much more readable than just a bunch of calculation. So that's why I love @const too. So these were some Svelte changes. Let's fly through some other SvelteKit changes because from the last week, there are a bunch of SvelteKit changes. We will go to the meat after this, but there also were a bunch of releases about enhanced images. Obviously, they are continuing working on the new enhanced image. Um,
Yeah, further up to 1.28, that's where we left off. It was about some patches, and you're about to see a few breaking changes.
Yes, absolutely. So, new, like a better interaction with Svelte 5. There are upgrade to prettier tree in Create Svelte. A bunch of like new changes to the creator, the create package to various adapters. And this was mostly like to prepare for the big guy. We will get to it in a while because, like as you can see, adapters, various fixes to SvelteKit. I want to see if there are some interesting feature. So this is deprecating top level promise await. This is a hint for something that we will uh, add the resolve root to $up/pat, deprecate resolve pat. These are all like small minor changes that will lead to something. And we will get there in a moment. So, yeah, okay, revert. Correct. Breaking requires SvelteKit 2, and that's something interesting. Because in an unexpected turn of event, like the maintainers decided to give us like a very cool Christmas present.
The anticipation is driving me crazy.
Yeah, what can this be? And I mean, we already anticipated it's SvelteKit 2, like SvelteKit 2.0 is officially released. And let's go over like the main changes. This is the official changelog, obviously. Obviously, like this was not a super big release with the new features coming up. There are some new feature. There are some a bunch of breaking changes. Basically, like to support Vite5, maintainers decided to create this small maintenance release with a bunch of small breaking changes, new features, and let's go over it. So first thing first, one interesting one is that they removed top-level promise awaiting. So if you wasn't aware, basically, like if you returned a promise from a load function, if it was on the top level of the object, SvelteKit will automatically await that promise. This was something that personally I don't think I've ever used, because I mean, awaiting is just a 5-6 letter words that I can write just to make sure, you may never know. Also, like, this was like kind of like, basically this was the reason why you had to nest a promise to stream that promise to the client, and they removed it. So now every promise that you send, even if it's a top level one, will be streamed to the client. So if you want your actual promise to not be a promise and to be the result, just await it on the client, on the server. Very easy. There are some other breaking change. For example, they removed some value that were passed to usenums that were basically just duplicated. There was form and something else that was later replaced with form element, and now they removed the duplicated one, basically. This is another important one. Like, they turned error and redirect into command. What does it mean? On the load function on the server, before, if you want to redirect somewhere or if you want to throw an expected error, you had to throw error or throw redirect. They changed this, and so now you just have to call this function and it just worked the same. Depends now require a colon as part of the string on the type level. This is also something important, maybe. Remove resolve path in favor of resolve root in $up/paths. Drop support for Svelte 3. Whoa.
Yeah, and we're going to find out soon enough that some peer dependencies have changed. Part of the biggest reason SvelteKit 2 is a breaking change is so that they can fit in some peer dependency Node.js requirements that are now upgraded to their respective breaking changes. And at the same time, the SvelteKit maintainers can say, okay, now there's an opportunity to deprecate or change behaviors as well, but not too many, hopefully, for most of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, like, I have like already migrated a bunch of up, and honestly is not that big of a deal. So it will be a pretty smooth transition, especially because we have Svelte migrate. So you can just do npx Svelte migrate SvelteKit -2, and it will mostly just like do the changes for you. Another breaking change is that Svelte.js Vite plugin Svelte is now a peer dependency. So before it was installed with each project. Now you have to install it. I mean, you don't actually have to install it, because once you create, you do pnpm create Svelte, it will actually be already there installed for you. But it's a separate dependency now. They are not re-exporting Vite preprocess, and that's why also you have to change the import of Vite preprocess from Svelte.js/kit to Svelte.js, I think Vite plugin Svelte. Remove state option for Go2 in favor of shallow routing. So this is one of the features that were released with SvelteKit 2.0, and we will go over that soon. But basically, like, this made passing a state to Go2 kind of redundant, so they removed it. And also, you cannot use Go2 to navigate externally to your app. So before, you could just go, for example, go to https://google.com to navigate to Google. Now is not allowed anymore, so you can just navigate to relative paths. A new model resolution set to bundler instead of node next. Um, and then like the minor changes, which are the features. So this is a very interesting one. They added untrack to load. So now every load function will receive an untrack function that you can call to basically make your load function ignore that thing, basically. So in the example, I don't know if it's there. No, I think it's here. So it's basically to opt out of load invalidation. So whenever you access url.pathname, url.search inside your load function, this will basically mark that load function to be invalidated whenever URL change or whenever params.x changed. And sometimes maybe you just want to log it once and you don't want a dependency on it. And so now you can use the untrack function to, I think there was, no. I remember seeing an example, but like, yeah, you can use untrack to remove the dependency basically.
Yeah, I like this one because this kind of completes the functionality of load behavior. In SvelteKit 1, we had the ability to use load parameters, and anytime those parameters were utilized, it became automatically tracked. So if things like params changed or URL changes, your load method will rerun. But in SvelteKit 1, we only had the ability to add additional things using the depends function. So if you call depends, you can add extra requirements. But now in SvelteKit 2, it's complete because now you have untrack. So there's three options: automatic tracking with load, automatic or manual opting in with depends, and now finally manually opting out with untrack.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very big feature. This was showcased by Rich, the last before Svelte Summit, and this basically allow you to have basically like the Instagram effect. So basically, you can, for example, navigate somewhere. So instead of properly navigating, you can use push state or replace state, and this will update the URL on the URL bar, but it will not actually navigate there. So you can use the state to, for example, show a model, and these allow basically the user to copy the URL and link it to someone else. And also, these allow you to have like a plus page in that URL that you can show when you don't open that with JS. So, for example, if the user has not JS, you can just click the link and navigate there. But if you have JS, you can open up a model, for example. So this is good for progressive enhancement. There is the video, if you are interested. There is the video from Ricciuti from the Svelte Summit, and also like just right after the SvelteKit 2.0 release, Huntabyte made a video on shallow routing to showcase how it works. So go check it out because it's very... Sorry?
Oh no, I was just playing Huntabyte's video. We'll keep a link in the description below within the next day or two so you can check out a deeper example of shallow routing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also this feature to provide SvelteKit with HTML typings. This is something about the internal stack trace. The internal stack trace is rewrote basically when reporting config errors, and now is just rewrote in some occasions. And this is, I mean, I'm a bit of a fan of this because this is always about load function invalidation, and I actually contributed with this feature, so I am pretty proud of this. But basically, these allow you to like basically before, whenever you access a search params, the whole URL was tracked. So this means that if you access the page search params, for example, and then the tab search params change, the load function will still rerun, despite the fact that you are not actually using the tab search params inside the URL. And with this feature, basically, is what allow you to allows you to avoid rerunning the load function. And I've also prepared an example of this. So this is a very basic example. So you have, again, this page and these tabs, basically. So this is the content of the page 0 that was loaded by the load function. So in this case, the load function is very simple. It's just access the search params.page. And I'm logging running load function just to make you see that it's actually running. And then I'm awaiting 2 seconds and returning the page. Inside the plus page.svelte, I'm just showing the data.page. So this is actually the content that is being updated by the load function. But for example, this may happen, like maybe you have the content of the page on the client side and you don't want to rerun the load function every time you change a tab. And so with this new change, what you can do is basically if you click on a page, it will actually wait 2 seconds and then you can see the flash to see. So it's rerunning. And let me just restart the server so that you can see. It's running the load function. It's waiting for 2 seconds. If I change the page, it's running the load function again. If I change the page, it's running the load function again. But then if I change the tab, for example, given that only the tab search parameter is changing, the load function does not rerun. And this is, I think, quite good because your load function will run less, and this also allow you to have progressive enhancement tabs, which is what I was hoping for.
Very cool. Thank you for contributing that, Paolo. Everyone give thanks to Paolo for contributing to SvelteKit 2, because the SvelteKit 1 behavior was certainly, for most people, I'd say a little bit wasteful because you're constantly rerunning load when you only changed a particular search param, which only requires a change in some code that you're downloading from your load function. And with this, the specific search params you use in load are now tracked. So that's great.
Yeah, also this, for example, is also very useful if, for example, you are downloading a bunch of data inside a layout, for example, and you want that data to be reactive to a search params because you are using that search params to actually get the load data. But then maybe you have a bunch of subroute that are not using that. If you don't change that search params, the subroute does not need to reload all of the data. It's already there. And with this change, basically, you can go to a bunch of details, a bunch of subroutes, and if that specific load search params is not changed, it will not rerun. So I think it's a good thing. And obviously, there are a bunch of patch changes. For example, pre-render optional parameter as empty when entries contains I can't remember how it's called. Import Svelte types from Svelte compiler, reset invalid resources after a successful invalidation. So these are a bunch of fixes for SvelteKit 2.0. So this was a very big changelog, but I mean, I guess it's a good Christmas present from the maintainers.
Yeah, we tried to cover as much as we could within a short time. And I guess what you need to do is go to the SvelteKit documentation today. If you're currently on a SvelteKit 1 project, go to the documentation and look for the upgrade guide from SvelteKit 1 to SvelteKit 2, and there it will show you how to run the migration script. You don't have to change anything. You just run the migration script. It'll know which version of SvelteKit you're already running, and it will guide you through the upgrade process as well as modify your code when it can do so easily. So check that out. Check out the list of all the break-in changes that may impact your project. I know for me, I do a little bit of promises return for my load functions, but now I need to await them, for example, and I'm sure the code mod will help me with that. Another highlight in changes is the handle error hook has changed behavior. So if you throw an error or if there's an unexpected error in your load methods or APIs, the handle error hook will be called with a 500 error, and the error message will be provided to your error page in a special way that is safe. So instead of your uncaught error being displayed to the user, it'll only show a user-friendly error that's secure. So you can check out the newest behaviors in the handle error documentation.
Yeah. Perfect. So we have like covered the big changelog, so we can move definitely to.
Let's see some impressions though from the chat. So Grish has some comments saying very good changes in general, error and redirect being probably your favorites, and of course shallow routing.
Yeah, very
And
good.
then another question from the chat was, are islands architecture support available in SvelteKit? Not at this time, but I'm sure they're exploring islands architecture, but there's no news officially to say today.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like speaking of island architecture, I might be wrong, but I think one of the thing that like people misses about island architecture is that it kind of requires you to be a multi-page application, right?
Beats me. I think islands architecture is particularly useful for content-heavy websites because
Absolutely.
I'm not a hydration expert, but my limited understanding is if you have like a large article, then it doesn't make sense to download all of the JavaScript for that article twice. And partial hydration helps with that because just the parts that are interactive can be downloaded and the content is not downloaded twice. Those are the kinds of situations that people demand from Islands architecture, and that's what the SvelteKit team is exploring. Because I think the general theme of SvelteKit 2 is to be a little bit less magical. Like a good example of less magic is the automatic top level awaiting and load functions. And now you're in more control of what gets awaited, what doesn't get awaited, what gets tracked, what doesn't get tracked. So the control is back into your hands, and as well as the general cleanup. So like a spin-off conversation of this is, how often should a meta framework have breaking changes? How often should any software have breaking changes? For example, we're still on, I think, Git version 2, and that's good because that's like the sort of software you want to be stable for as long as possible. But for meta frameworks like SvelteKit, it's been 1 year since SvelteKit 1 was released, and now we have a breaking change. I don't see too many deprecations except for the generate URL function. I think it's resolve path is deprecated, resolve route is the new function. That's an example of a deprecation that's gracefully upgraded to something new and different. But the breaking changes overall is just mostly behavioral, and the general concepts of SvelteKit, the core concepts of form actions, routing, the things we use the most, generally stayed the same. And I
Yes.
think that's a good approach. You have to have this balance of moving forward and improving the framework, but also staying stable so that your users don't have to feel left out all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we've seen this also with Svelte 5. I think maintainers are very focused on back compatibility. And I think it's a very good thing because obviously, like having a framework that changes completely between like 1 month and the other can be frustrating. So I think the maintainers absolutely like know this and they are trying to make everything as seamless as possible. And another very good like the fact that they are also developing code mod with Svelte Migrate to help you do that. It's also another very important thing because most of the time, like when SvelteKit 1.0 was released, the only thing that I had to do basically is just run a script. And when SvelteKit 2 was released, the only thing that I had to do was run a script, basically. So
Yeah, and it's sometimes breaking changes, or I think especially in the Node.js ecosystem, breaking changes are necessary at least once a year because of Node.js itself. Like obviously there's other runtimes on the horizon, such as Dino and Bun, but for Node.js in particular, which has a very enterprisey release schedule, which is good for stability, the newest LTS is Node.js 20. SvelteKit 2.0 requires a minimum version of Node.js, I believe 18.13. Correct me if I'm wrong. And of course, Vite 5 was released recently. And since Vite 5 itself has breaking changes and the plugin has breaking changes, that cascades to some dependency breaking changes.
yes, obviously.
Introduction of a peer dependency is a breaking change. And since the SvelteKit 2 team had a very timely release of SvelteKit 2 to put in all of these dependency breaking changes, I think that's a win for us as developers so that the upgrade is less often. And I'd like to hope that SvelteKit 3 has a similar cadence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a question we had in the chat was, should I start my project with SvelteKit 2 today? And the answer I gave them was yes, because the current latest stable release of SvelteKit is 2.0. It's not a beta, it is the latest. However, if you, so in other words, if you don't know if you need SvelteKit 2, use SvelteKit 2. But if you do know you have certain plugins or dependencies that have a peer dependency of SvelteKit 1, I think Sentry, for example, only supports SvelteKit 1 today, but I'm sure the team is working on upgrading support. If you know you have a dependency that's not quite ready for SvelteKit 2, then hold off for a bit. But if you don't know and you're starting a brand new project from scratch, absolutely get right into SvelteKit 2.
Absolutely, yes. And also, I mean, in general, like, especially if your project is not super big, just try it out, because sometimes, like, it takes time for library authors to just update that single peer dependency field. So just try out and see if everything works fine. Okay, let's move to another juicy part of this week as well, which is with our with our guest for today, which is Anurag. So I will add you to the stage, and everybody give a warm welcome to Anurag, that will showcase his project, which is called Sveltease, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, it's Sveltease.
And
I had quite a difficult time determining the name, so
I think it's a very good name. So it also, like, kind of explain what it does, but we will leave you the stage so that, like, if you share your screen, which I think, yeah, you already did it, we can showcase what Sveltease does, and we will leave the stage so that you can, like, enjoy your time.
All right. Don't forget to zoom in. We'll see you soon.
Bye
yeah,
bye.
okay. Okay. So thank you, Paolo and Enrico, for giving me space to present myself with this library I had made. And I'd also like to thank them for introducing those breaking changes in SvelteKit, because I had just deployed the SvelteKit application in production quite a few days ago. So I hope the migration script will run well, like it did in the past. Anyways, uh, let's talk about Sveltease. And before that, let me give a short introduction about myself. So I'm Anurag, and I've been working as a software engineer for 3 years now. And I started as a Java intern, and I migrated to JavaScript, let's say. And I've been quite a fan of Sveltease. And let's see what Sveltease is. Sveltease is a very lightweight library which allows to integrate Svelte component with any front-end frameworks. So, I mean, it may not include all frameworks. I think it won't work with Angular. I haven't tried it with Angular, so it will work with Vue, React with Vite, React with CRA, Webpack, and it also work with Next.js. So yeah, we can inject multiple Svelte components in multiple parts of our code, and we can also pass the state, let's say the React state to Sveltease, to Svelte component through Sveltease, and it will reflect in the Svelte component too. So here's installation guide, package configuration, uses, and let me tell you something how I got inspired to build this library. So uh, in the place where I work, everything is migrating to Svelte. So there was a legacy React project where I used to work, and there was a Svelte library that I had to integrate in the React project. So I didn't know how to do that, and I started exploring with Svelte. And like every other programmer, I have also the desire to build the libraries. So I built these libraries. Uh, so yeah, that's the short story about what Svelte it is. And here's the installation guide, and here's the uses. I can use it with React. We'll see the code in a bit. Here's the Next.js. We can also integrate it with Vue. So like I said earlier, I haven't tried it with Angular, so I can tell for sure it will work or not. It's in a very initial stage. So I think that's about it, and let's go through the code. But there's this small React application that I built. So I think the time constraint is a big issue here. So I had to code it beforehand before coming in this stream. So this small React Svelte integration app uses the Sveltease, and we'll also go through the code of Sveltease in a bit. So let's first see what it does. So it's running in, it's already running. So let's see. So this is basically a simple page. I haven't got chance to update and redesign it. So sorry for that. So let's see how it works. So the top part here is the Svelte component, and this is also a Svelte component, which is the child of this component, and the down portion is React. So let's see what happens when I update the React state. So as you can see, so let me zoom in a little bit. I think it's visible. So when I update the React state, it works in Svelte, and it also works in the child component. I think it's pretty basic because Svelte components, we can create its object and pass the props. But we'll see what I've done here. So increasing the internal state won't affect the React state, and we can also update the React states from within the Svelte. So I think this about the demo, and let's go through the code. To see what I've done here, let's start with the main file. So this is the main application is starting here, and what I've done is I've created a div and I've given it a unique ID of Svelte wrapper 1, and as you can see here, I've imported this library from Sveltease, and I have passed this Svelte component and also the ID, and we can also pass the props if this home Svelte file requires any external props. So I have passed the React state, and it's also a set state. I have passed it here, and I have stored its reference in this variable. And upon the component did on mount, I have cleaned up this component. So we'll see what it does in a bit. So here are the Svelte components. So this is the home Svelte. I guess I didn't know how to name any proper file name for this. So sorry for that. So there is another Svelte component which is child of this component. So what there is nothing any special here. So I have exported this variable, and here's the count value. Hey, I am from Svelte component. I am to be used inside React. So this part is all this home Svelte file. So here's also on the Svelte component. Here I pass the React state, and we can see I can also render React state. So this is. So let's see how it works. So when this first React app renders, this portion will run first. Why this portion will run first? Because Sveltease won't when Sveltease function is called, it won't immediately run it. So it will put it in a set timer. So basically it schedules, and after this is executed, then this Sveltease function is called. So basically, let's see what Sveltease does. Yeah. So this function basically takes 3 arguments. So first one is the Svelte component, second one is ID, and the third one is the Svelte component props. So what it does is it returns a promise, and it calls this function. So this is nothing but just a set timeout that calls the function after a time. So time is basically 0. So here are some error checks, and the main part is here. So Sveltease component is initialized. So previously I named the library Sveltifier, but it was already taken. So the variable names are Sveltifier, but the library is Svelte. So Sveltease component. So what this does is this just stores the component element ID. Of course, after validating it, what it does in the validation is it checks the ID if it is present in the DOM or not. So that's why I had to render it after certain time. So it schedules instead of runs immediately. So after this error checks and initialization, so it basically calls this ignite function. What it does is this will create a new Svelte component. When this Svelte component is created, I store the component in the Svelte component KV. This basically is just an empty object. So for that element ID, this component is stored here. So when the next time the React component re-renders, again this ignite function is called, and this time this function will check if already exists, will return true because it already exists. So this ID must be unique that we have passed here. So this is basically the ID where Svelte gets injected, so it must be unique for every Sveltease component call. So if it already exists, then it just updates the prop. So I think everyone is integrating Svelte, and there is nothing new here. So I also had this challenge for every project. I had to create, for example, to integrate Svelte in React, I had to install this Svelte plugin, and also if there is TypeScript present, I had to create this file. So I think this became the extra hassle. So I also wrote a CLI tool that automates this. By no means it's a perfect CLI tool. There is no any Babel or Acon.js used, but it does its job. So let's see what it does. Let me just quickly create a folder. And let me just run this command. So first I have to create the React project. Let's use TypeScript. So while it's installing the package, let's go through the docs of Sveltease. So there's this tool called Sveltease CLI. For if you want to integrate Svelte in Vue, you can run this command and it will auto-generate all. It will auto-install all the required packages. It will auto-generate the file if you are using TypeScript and so on. It will also create a backup for already existing file. So if you have pre-configured some of the configurations, then it will create a backup file. Then you can put it on later. So for React CRA, you can do this, and for Webpack you can do this. Since I'm using React with Vite, let's continue with this. So it has to be installed. By no means it has to be installed as a global package. We can just use npx. So it will ask some basic questions. Which package manager are you using? So I am using npm. So are you using TypeScript? So this check is to generate the Svelte config file. So it will just install Sveltease plugin, and here's a small notice. I have created backup files. So it basically means this is the this was the original configuration file while we created the React project with it. So this is the new file created by the CLI. So it basically kept the backup, and it also created this Svelte package. So this is how it works. Due to constraints of time, I think I won't be able to show you coding live apart from creating this project. But I think this Sveltease CLI and Sveltease will play a big part, as it did in my job. So there was this legacy React project where I had to integrate Svelte, and this successfully did a job. However, there are some challenges. Still, there are some challenges, like you can see. Let me just go to the code of React Svelte integration, and let me just show you this. So here's this TS ignore, as you might have noticed already. So if I remove this, there is still some type error that Svelte throws argument of type. So I haven't worked on this. And on the challenge I encountered while developing this library was the Svelte library that I tried to integrate was it was basically a UI component collection of UI components, and it was using Tailwind. So every Tailwind classes that I used were not working properly, so I hadn't worked on that. We later on migrated it to native style, native CSS. So that problem was resolved, but still Tailwind won't work properly with Sveltease. There are lots of rooms for improvement in Sveltease. So I think that sums it up about Sveltease. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Anurag, for sharing. So while Paolo unmutes, I just want to bring up questions in the chat and also address a few comments. Let me just bring down your screen. So yeah, Sveltease is a very important tool. For those of you in the chat wondering, I develop in Svelte exclusively. Why would I need this? There's a really easy answer that Anurag brought up in the beginning, which is if you're a Svelte user, yeah, you may not need this. But if there's a React component or a Vue component out there that you want to integrate with your app, then Sveltease can help integrate the two. Especially, and Anurag, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is a Vite exclusive tool. Is that what Sveltease is for?
Yeah, it was initially used for Vite exclusive tool, but it supports Webpack too now, because that Svelte CLI uses the Webpack merge tool that will merge the original Webpack configuration with the Webpack I created, which includes Svelte loader.
Yes.
So it will also work with Webpack.
Okay, cool. So it does work with Webpack. And that's important because for the past 10 years, since React and Vue have been around, this is the biggest use case I see. There are lots of enterprise teams or companies with legacy software written in Vue or React, and they're trying to migrate gradually to Svelte. And I think that's a big use case for Sveltease. This is a problem that's bigger than some of you can imagine because it's not talked about very much. These are the hard integration issues that many teams with legacy code bases are facing today. And having a tool that seamlessly or easily integrates the forthcoming framework you wish to be using on your team and the one you're still maintaining from a legacy code base, that's such an important problem that needs to be solved. And I think I heard rumblings in the Svelte 5 chat from the maintainers that this is also an important goal for them, because that interoperability with Svelte and other frameworks is for this problem in particular. Even 20 years ago, this problem is an old problem because sometimes you're a Ruby or a PHP team and you want to integrate your legacy Ruby project with a new PHP project. This is like a really common and timeless issue when it comes to software integration and evolution.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I mean, I think this library really showcase probably one of the best features of Svelte, because if you want to do the same thing in the opposite way, so like if you want to try to integrate a React component into Svelte, it's probably doable, but it brings with him the whole React runtime. And it's just not something that Svelte has, right? So Svelte 5 will have a bit of runtime overhead, but it's very easy to integrate a new Svelte component inside React because you don't have to bring the whole Svelte runtime with you. So this is, I think, another very useful feature of Svelte.
Yeah, and I think part of that story is also web native APIs. Signals will soon become like a web native feature. Application routing will soon become a browser native feature. And if frameworks like Vue or Svelte all adopt that, then the interoperability will be even easier. So there may come a stage, maybe in 3 to 5 years, where the only difference between frameworks really is a developer experience, because the code overhead will shrink as we leverage more and more browser standard tools.
Let's all hope for that moment.
I'm speaking idealistically. Any last comments, Anurag? Where can people follow you? Where can people find your project?
You can find my project on GitHub. I think Paolo and Enrico will leave the links in the description below. And I think Svelte is the new future, and we are really looking forward to it. Our company is really growing, and it's gradually switching to Svelte, and lots of other my peer software engineers are also looking into Svelte, and it's also Svelte is also gradually moving towards the applications, mobile applications, and so on. So I think Sveltease will be a great opportunity to gradually migrate your project into Svelte. And I think the components that we built in Svelte will be really on the safe side. Later on, if the React updates or Vue updates, then we can be assured that our component is in on Svelte, and we can easily integrate to our any other front-end framework. So that's my ultimate goal. Yeah, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, thank you, Anurag. And well, I mean, I guess we've talked a lot about the newest release, the new toy that maintainers gave us for Christmas. And I think for today it's all. We don't have any Q&A or discussion, but I mean, we have talked about a bunch of stuff enough. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for joining us during our Friday rambling, and we will see you in next week in Svelte.
Bye bye.
Bye everybody.